I don't know whether it was legal, but there was no international law from the U.S. side. So I don't know whether what Russia did was legal, but I know what the United States was doing was completely illegal, repeatedly, nonstop. And I think that's really important. And to me, just to, by the way, make the point, the coup in 2014 is not even close. It's a US-backed, spurred, provoked, and perhaps fully managed coup. I don't know every detail of what happened, but I know a lot. And two things I know. One, everybody knows. We know Victoria Nuland's role because not only did she tell us, but it was also intercepted nicely by the Russians so we could listen to it. And I very much appreciate that tape because it's just one of the most vulgar conversations in modern American history. Now she's my colleague at Columbia University. And second was that immediately after the coup, I was called by the new Ukrainian government. I didn't know really what was going on, didn't understand it very well, but Yatsenyuk, who was the prime minister that came in, said, I'd like to speak to you because you're the guy that knows how to handle financial emergencies. So I went to Kiev and I was shown around by an NGO who explained to me how much they had paid for the Maidan. So I ended up leaving that afternoon, sick to my stomach, and really grossed out, I have to say, by the whole thing. But I was proudly told, what a great operation we just had. Okay, this is really disgusting. It's illegal. It is a cause of war. It created a war. It is the deep state, and it's what the U.S. does for a living. So it's a very vivid case, and to my mind, it showed how utterly disgusting the U.S. approach was. I would not have known it exactly, but for being there that one day, because it was pretty awful.
And how invested do you think the United States is in a hot war in Ukraine? Because it seems to me that escalating and escalating and escalating, whether they are playing chicken or whether they genuinely want an all-out NATO-Russia war, there does seem to be a kind of policy that would risk it. What do you think is the US priority, and what do you think the US goals are? Do you think they're committed enough that they would permit a hot war between NATO and Russia?
I think there are a few things to say, which is first, the U.S. the U.S. military-industrial complex is a big, complicated organization of $1 trillion a year business plus. So it doesn't change quickly. And what we're observing is a strategy that was put in place 30 years ago. And there has not been a formal change to that strategy till now. Now, when it was put in place, they really believed in the unipolar world. China was nowhere on the horizon. Russia seemed completely helpless in all of this. And so a strategy was put in place that is literally still in place, and literally in place in the sense that if you look at formal doctrine, like the U.S. Defense posture or U.S. foreign policy strategy or other documents that are produced, one should take these documents seriously in that they're not pablum for public consumption, though of course they have a public-facing side. They are bureaucratic exercises of a huge bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy is not run on a whim. It's really run by a lot of generals and a lot of committees and a lot of staffing and a lot of organizations and a lot of missile systems and $1 trillion a year outlays. So that doctrine hasn't changed. And the idea of the doctrine and the decisions taken were that the US should have full spectrum dominance in all parts of the world. Now, it's a delusion. It was hubris then, reckless, but now it's completely delusional because obviously we don't have full spectrum dominance. Well, they haven't gotten around to writing a different strategy yet. There's no document that says, now we are in a multipolar world, what should we do? We're still on the old strategy. Believe me, a lot of people believe in it. Some people, no doubt, don't believe in it. I'm prepared to believe there's a debate inside, which they don't cut me in on, but I'm prepared to believe that there are different points of view. And some people say, shit, we shouldn't get into a nuclear war. And other people say, come on, stay on strategy, and so on. Then, of course, up until now, I think the feeling was things are more or less working out okay. Why? Because, yeah, maybe we spend $100 billion a year, but okay, we're a $28 trillion economy. That's not a big deal. This is to defeat Russia, so come on. Keep a perspective. Second, they absolutely could care less about how many Ukrainians die. It's not even an issue. It's not a plus, but it's not a negative. The only problem is they're running out of Ukrainians, like the slogan says. They actually can't literally grab people off the streets, put them in training, and put them on the front line to stop the Russians right now. So that's real, not because they changed the strategy or they were wringing their hands saying, God, this didn't work out the way we wanted. There's 600,000 Ukrainians dead. I don't think they give a fuck, if you'll excuse me, because I've never heard one word of regret about that. And so they're playing a hand with a lot of bluff. They're playing a hand where it's not their lives on the line. It's not their money on the line. But what is happening isn't working. So that's interesting. And it's not only not working, it's adverse. Ukraine is it's losing on the battlefield. All these NATO weapons didn't turn the tide. Being cut out of the SWIFT banking system didn't turn the tide. Comprehensive US sanctions didn't turn the tide. UN sanctions against North Korea are over. Russia's allied with Iran. China is a peer competitor in every real way, if not way ahead in manufacturing in many areas. And so it's not working. And so they're not counting the money, which isn't a big deal. They're not counting the lives at all, which is my disappointment because, I would have thought 600,000 lives would mean something, that someone might notice that and say something about that, because I truly believe this is a cataclysmic tragedy. They don't want to have a nuclear war. They really don't. I'm sure of that, by the way, because everybody would end up dead. So I don't think that that's a game. But they thought that, short of that, we'll keep trying. We'll try this, we'll try that, we'll do the sanctions, we'll do this, we'll have the counteroffensive. And none of the costs of that mattered to the US strategists. So my take when you ask on this is they can't be happy with the situation right now. But again, remember, it's not their money, it's not their lives, it's not a US draft. They do not want nuclear war, I'm sure. But on the other hand, they kept thinking, we got to beat these guys somehow, and they can't, and they won't. And Russia is very, it's very cautious, I would say, step by step. But it really does not want to be attacked inside in Moscow. It does not want US missiles. And they're debating this right now as we speak. And I'll say the following. The British are the worst by far because there's no constraint on Britain, because Britain is a kind of cheerleader. It has nothing to add to this at all, except 180 years of Russophobia, which goes back to 1840 by my date. And so Britain is the most irresponsible because it was the greatest empire. It's got endless empire nostalgia. It's got endless Russophobia, and it would say or do anything because it just would. Then come the Baltics and Poland, which hate Russia so much they can taste it. And they want anything to defeat Russia. And then you have the Zelensky regime, which hangs by a thread because they've killed so many people. It's been a disaster. It's been lies. It's been everything. He rules by martial law, by the fingernail, as I said. And you have the Americans who are on a 30-year plan that is coming to an end because it can't work. And the delusions are springing out everywhere. And no doubt, American history shows through leaks and memoirs and gossip and then declassification how many utterly stupid people we have in positions of high responsibility that are so stupid it's hard to imagine, so reckless, so ready to have a nuclear war. And I imagine some of those people are around. And we have a president who is who's long past the sell-by date. And that's a bad thing because the main job of a US president, which Biden never performed, but the main job of a US president is to stop the war machine. And Biden never really did that, but now he probably can't even do that.
It's an interesting or scary mix when you've got this president you talk about who's barely there, and then these hawks that are willing to take massive risks really by striking into Russia itself. So for me, it seems like it could spiral out of control very quickly. When you were talking about Washington's disregard for Ukrainian life, and as you said, 600,000 Ukrainian lives have been sacrificed for this policy from Washington, it made me think of Israel's war in Gaza, which is also a US war, and the total disregard for Palestinian life there. It seems to me there are parallels between the two wars.
Absolutely. By the way, direct parallels. Nobody counts the dead. Nobody in Washington. It's not even an issue, but they're trained. This is what's called sophistication. They never count the dead. But by the way, that goes through Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, it goes to Syria, it goes to Afghanistan, it goes to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's truly, utterly the American way, is you do not count the dead.
In my opinion, Gaza is a major turning point in world history just because of the awakening it's ushered in amongst the global population. Because we've had 11 months of genocide be live streamed on our phones. We've seen some of the most awful things we've ever seen. And yet we've looked as well to Washington and seen President Biden, who's a Democrat, who are meant to be the good guys, defend it all, arm it all, and ventriloquize Israeli propaganda. Now, for people who don't understand how the system works, which is most people, this has been a real sea change because they can't put those two contradictory things together. How can America say that it's for human rights, democracy, fairness, when the president is defending some of the most awful things we've ever seen? And do you think that the awakening that has been around the world about the reality of US power over Gaza has changed the view of the United States and its role in the world?
Everything about Gaza is grotesque, disgusting. Uh, it is a genocide. It is war crimes every day. But it's not so different from many other things that the US has done. It's shocking because we see it, and we see TikTok feeds of celebrating rabbis and celebrating IDF personnel and so forth, gloating as they blow up a hospital or blow up a university, or we have the accounts of torture. But I'm telling you, it's not different. Napalming the Vietnamese, carpet bombing North Korea, by the way, in 1951, 52. There were no cameras there, but it was mass carpet bombing. What we did in Cambodia and Laos. I've seen a lot of these places post-war, also to walk through Cambodia, and there are large places when you go, no, we can't go there. There's still so much ordnance in the field. There's still unexploded mines and horrible things. And the US still trying to collect debt from Cambodia 50 years later, after a debt taken on by a CIA-imposed government of Laos with an illegal bombing campaign of mass carpet bombing. So, and by the way, everything we know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which took a long time to come out, but where it was finally definitively established that the official line, which was that this was to bring the war to an end sooner, was a pile of crap. This was after the Japanese begged for to surrender. There was no reason to use the bomb except as a demonstration of American power and all the rest. And that's and to use two of them, and not to have a second thought after Hiroshima, but Nagasaki went ahead on its bureaucratic schedule a few days later. No, in this sense, Gaza is not different. It makes me sick, and it's something that my kids are seeing vividly for the first time. But since now I've become, not only having lived through these other wars, but now have spent the last 20 years trying to understand all of this better, it's not qualitatively different, actually.
But I think that the fact that we're all seeing it in a way we hadn't before has changed things, because people are seeing something that the propaganda system doesn't usually let them see. So it's a different, for me, it's created a different kind of feel in the global community. And from your experience in Washington, working on the inside, I just wanted to ask, how powerful do you think the secret agencies within our politics are? Because this is a system which is often called parapolitics, the parts of our political system which are secret, which operate in the shadows. And many people are scared to talk about them because they don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist. And I think that that is a very powerful way of controlling the debate, because if you make people scared of talking about this stuff, then the population at large won't do it. But you have the CIA, particularly in Washington, which has huge amounts of power and was only reined in briefly in 1975 during the Church Committee, but was unleashed in many ways after September the 11th and became a kind of paramilitary or private army of the president. So can you just say, how powerful do you think the CIA is, and how powerful do you think this parapolitical system is within our political body?
Well, first of all foreign policy of the United States is conducted secretly. So everything is classified. The American public is not really told anything about key decision-making, risks, strategies, and so forth. As I say, there are documents that need to be made public for bureaucratic reasons, also just to keep this complex machine pointed in particular directions. But the amount of secrecy is staggering. I don't know the numbers offhand, but the biggest crime in Washington is leaking classified material, because the whole state depends on secrecy. So that's not just the CIA, it is the security state broadly. The CIA is extremely powerful within that because it operates all over the world. It's the president's private army. It operates with impunity. There is no oversight at all, as far as I'm concerned. Even the quote unquote oversight of the intelligence committees are of members of Congress that are completely suborned by the intelligence agencies to begin with. The remarkable fact of the Church Committee really tells the story. We've had 77 years of the CIA, and since 1947, so that is 77 years, and there has been one congressional investigation 49 years ago. It's the only time. And when it was investigated, one absolute horror after another was revealed, and for 49 years since then, there's been no Church Committee. And when you look at the church or church-like committee, and when you look at the Church Committee, it was an astounding set of historical coincidences that enabled it to happen.